Welcome to the first in a series of impromptu videos that I just feel moved to start to produce, either for Integrated Tarot, which is my primary business, but also for another blog that I write, or I've set up and I write for, which is the Sharp Shoe Tricks. Which they and both of them have in common something that really is a passion of mine. And if you've been reading my newsletters over the past couple of weeks about disengaging from much of my tarot work, you'll know that the passion that I have is really studying the nature of the unconscious as it was first described by Sigmund Freud, and particularly as it was developed then by Carl Jung, who was really a mentee of Freud's. And I'm just going to see how these videos go, because I'm not sure if there's any meaning to them. I am going to go on the proviso that there is meaning, that there is something driving them. So let's see what happens. I may post them on my Integrated Tarot YouTube page. I may post them on Sharp Shoe Tricks YouTube page. I'll see, maybe both. But we'll just see where tarot and the unconscious intersects and where it diverges. And so I hope that you'll join me on this exploration, very much an exploration of the process of the videos unfolding themselves as much as the subject matter that I'm going to be talking about. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about the nature of the unconscious. I work with it so much, it's been so much a part of my own life that I forget that it isn't something that is as much of somebody else's life as my own, which seems particularly egocentric, I know, but I've often felt that when I try and describe the unconscious that I'm basically talking about something that everyone knows about. And so I'm going to take a step back and assume that not everyone knows about what this is, or maybe doesn't know quite as much, and I'm still learning, so these videos will also probably chart the process of my own progress through understanding the unconscious as I embark on my studies for an MA in Jungian and post-Jungian studies. But the unconscious is first posited by Freud as that aspect of ourselves that we're not aware of. It is an aspect of the psyche that resides completely out of our awareness. And not only does it reside out of our awareness, but it also drives many, if not most, of our behaviours, which is a very humbling thing to realise, that a lot of what we do has a very large unconscious component behind it, rather than simply the conscious attitude that we have towards it or what we think that we're doing. Case in point being that when we do something and we think that we're doing something for one particular reason at one time, we can look back maybe several weeks, several months, several years later, and then understand that there was a wisdom behind that had a very different agenda at its heart. And particularly if you look back at relationships, and with all of the pure intentions, the conscious intentions that we have going into them, then countered with the experience of the reality of a particular relationship. And then after a relationship has ended or changed form in some way, the post-mortem of the relationship that unfolds over a period of, days, weeks, months, years, again, decades sometimes. And then we see that there is a wisdom that was driving that relationship that led us to a greater understanding of ourselves, and also our relating style, and led us to shape the way that we relate with each other and with ourselves going forward, but perhaps not in the ways that we had first anticipated when we went into a relationship. So that's just an example of the idea that the unconscious is present in everything and really is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, driving factor behind most of the things that we do, even if our conscious mediating ego will tell us otherwise. And I think that one of the reasons why we want to tell ourselves that our egos are the ones that are ruling the show is that I think it can be entirely threatening and also incredibly disorientating to understand that we are not really in as much control of our lives as we like to believe that we are. And when we're not in that much control, then we tend to question the very fabric of the way that things are made up. And for some people, that's just not worth doing. and that's absolutely fair enough. And for other people, it is the work of a lifetime. And I think in my own, from my own perspective, just trying to get to grips with the unconscious, to, not that I can, that's a paradox in and of itself, but to get to grips with the idea that the unconscious is running the show is something that really has started to drive me more and more. So I thought that I would put my my money where my mouth is, as it were, and really talk a little bit more about the unconscious, and where it is today. I think where it is that it intersects with tarot, and why it is that I think that tarot is so much more than the kind of tarot that has traditionally been associated with fortune telling and well, pretty much fortune telling. Tell me about the future, tell me what's going to happen, when am I going to meet my prince, when am I going to fall in love, when am I going to get my dream job, you know, when am I going to get married. A lot of it centered again around or on relationship. And actually I think that that's really, it's the equivalent of buying a Lamborghini and then only limiting it to 30 miles an hour. It's great for the job, and actually tarot can do so much more than that. So the unconscious, everything that we are not aware of, and there is a reason why we're not aware of it, and there are various mechanisms that Freud explored, and then it was later sort of expanded upon by Anna Freud. Various mechanisms to keep what is in the unconscious in order to keep the waking or conscious life stable, and keep it operating on our own conscious terms. So, but what happens is, and one of the things that Freud explored was the fact that the conscious does come out. And it comes out in various ways. It makes itself known. There's a lovely saying that I found out a few years ago in the States, where things come out sideways. So they don't come at you. They kind of knock you off kilter. They are things that that take you unawares in your own behaviour. Something that you say, something that other people will say. That's very often the emergence of the unconscious. Slips of the tongue are the unconscious. In fact, we have come to know them as Freudian slips. And if there is one, it's worth pursuing. If you make a slip of the tongue, then I think it's one of the first things that are worth exploring, because that's the unconscious right there. It's revealed itself in a moment where the mediating ego wasn't entirely in charge of what it was that came out of your mouth. So that's the unconscious comes out there. It comes out in our feelings. It comes out in our bodily sensations. It comes out in symptoms that we experience in our bodies, and so psychosomatic disorders, for instance, are the presence of the unconscious moving through the body. There is something that is pushed out of consciousness as far as the mind is concerned, but the body is much more aware of it, and then that will come out in symptomatology and how we're feeling. A case in point is that I have lived with a diagnosis of fibromyalgia for the last 16 years. And when it first happened, it was so bad that I was on the sofa for the better part of 2 months. Every day I'd crawl out of bed, crawl onto the sofa and not be able to move. The pain was unbearable. My just headaches, cystitis, irritable bowel syndrome, everything and anything that you could think of was there that was confining me to the sofa. And one of the reasons why I think it did that was to make me reassess my life. And so a reassessment started, and it kind of, the first phase of it ended with my having to quit my job, really, because my bosses couldn't quite understand why I wasn't turning up to work every day, and I couldn't give them a satisfactory explanation, fibromyalgia being something that was really relatively new then. And luckily, one of the fibromyalgia experts in the world happened to live 20 minutes away from where I lived, so I actually was able to be diagnosed quite quickly. But then there's the diagnosis, and then there's the working through of that. And I swiftly came to understand that my fibromyalgia diagnosis, and I am only speaking for myself because I know that there will be people out there with fibromyalgia or who know somebody with fibromyalgia who will not agree with me. But I definitely, for me, felt like it was symptomatic of something that was going on deep in my psyche, that was really, first of all, had tried to tap me on the shoulder, and then was trying to shake me by the shoulders, and then eventually started to create a tremendous amount of pain in my body when I was out of integrity with what it was that I was actually doing and the choices I was making in my life. And so really that was a path that continues to that I continue to walk today. If I am out of integrity, if I'm making choices that are incorrect for me, the fibromyalgia flares up. If I'm in a relationship that isn't working, it flares up. If I'm doing a job that isn't working, where I'm trying to compromise and trying to bargain my way out of things, then the fibromyalgia flares up. It flared up 2 months ago. I had to decide what it was that was causing it, and realised in no small part it was to do with the choices I was making around tarot, and not so much that, but also what it was that I wasn't doing, which was pursuing this idea of pursuing the unconscious in a more ordered, more methodical, more rigorous way, hence going back to study. So there's a little bit of my own background with the idea that sometimes the unconscious shows up in what is repressed but then makes itself known through bodily symptoms. Another wonderful way to explore the unconscious is through our dreams. So the dreams really are our best and most reliable interface with the unconscious. And to keep a dream diary, to understand how to analyze dreams, is one of the most effective ways of working with the unconscious. But now we come to tarot, because this is where I think that we are underusing that poor Lamborghini that's traveling at 30 miles an hour. The tarot is also an incredible way of working with the emerging unconscious, or the unconscious. Instead of using the cards simply to talk about what's going to happen, which keeps us away from the present moment, which is in and of itself a way of avoiding the confrontation with the self and with the emerging unconscious. So we'll use tarot to think about the future and what wonderful things might happen to us and what awful things are going to go away if only we can see that they are going to go away in the cards. All of those tactics are things that really stop us, paradoxically, from looking at the unconscious, whereas when you use tarot in a different way, it actually aligns with the desire to work with the unconscious. And the way that it does that is very simple and not so easy to work with. And that is that in some way you hold an intention that the cards show you what is going on right now that you are not seeing. Now, when I work with tarot in this way, and I work with tarot like this most of the time, and you'll know from my work, if you've seen it, that I do work with the future as well, but I tend to bring it back into the present too. I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater in terms of tarot being a divinatory tool. It is a divinatory tool, but I also think that divination is a way of not only divining what's going to happen coming up, but also divining what's happening now, and that interface between now and the future is where we have the most ability to change things. It's where the rubber really hits the road. So in terms of the tarot, what we can do is set that clear intention for it to show us what we are not seeing, or what we are unaware of that we can become aware of. I tend to place some very clear guidelines around this when I'm working with people. I'm not particularly interested in having the cards show up everything that's there, that then needs to be sifted through by the ego. I think that sometimes a confrontation with something in the unconscious too quickly is not a good idea. In fact, it's not a good idea at all. There is a very, very, very good reason why it is in the unconscious and not in consciousness. If it was ready to be integrated into awareness, then it would be there and accessible. Which is why when I work with tarot, what I do is I work with the intention that it is what we are ready to see. And sometimes then what you do is you get a card and you'll go, but I know that already. This is simply validation. Well, then there you go. There's your answer. That's what you were ready to see, and not ready to see anything else. Sometimes you'll get a surprise, but it's a surprise that's normally one that isn't entirely unexpected. It's like, oh, I think I maybe had an inkling that card was going to come up. Sometimes it is an unexpected surprise. And normally that's one where something is in the process of happening, so it's really useful to be able to see it. Or it's something that really serves, and very often it's the idea of what is in the unconscious that we are pushing away, because it is some way that we feel that it's too good for us, and that we don't deserve it. So we work around those aspects as well that are in the unconscious, those aspects that sometimes, yes, we attribute to others because we just don't even begin to believe that we are able to have them ourselves. So there are varying degrees of what it is that we have access to in tarot, and I am very clear to set intentions that we are really only accessing what it is that's healthy for us and healthy for those around us. There is absolutely no use, or I think little use, in having an ego-shattering experience. It's messy, and it takes a while to piece oneself back together again, and I think it lies outside the remit of a tarot reader, even one who's working with the unconscious. I think it perhaps even lies outside the remit of a therapist, who would probably, if they are worth their salt, are very careful about not confronting in a way that kind of threatens the structure of our sense of reality and how we can function in the world in a way that lets us move through our day without falling apart. So really, tarot, divination, fabulous. If you want to find out what's going to happen, tarot can do that with varying degrees of accuracy, I think, depending on the level of connection that the reader has with the cards. But to work with it in the present moment in a way that is much more a psychological tool, I think that can be incredibly valuable, and it also, I think, addresses some of the very reasons why we want to race ahead and see what's in the future. It's not the most comfortable way of working with tarot. I'm sure that if I worked in the divinatory arts and put myself in terms of working with what's going to happen, that my work would be much more. I'd be doing readings much more regularly. As it is, I work with a core number of clients, and actually the work that we do goes so deep relatively quickly that I don't think that I would want to work any more regularly than I do. And in fact, I've now limited my work to 1 day a week anyway, so it seems to fall in line with very much how I am approaching the unconscious now, and how I'm choosing to study it and work with it, both academically and myself, and then secondarily for now in my tarot readings. So yes, tarot is a mirror. That's what it is, and tarot is a mirror, if we want it to be, to what is happening on the surface. And we could, I'm sure, have a request to the tarot to show us what it is that we are aware of that is going on in us and around us. But it is also a mirror that reveals depth, and that depth can go below the surface. So that way I often refer to it as a magic mirror. Magical simply being something beyond the reach of our conscious ability to describe it. And that, I think, is where it is useful, because it's not the reading itself that's important then. It's what we do with what we find in the reading. And so the tarot offers us an ability to have insight. And sometimes it doesn't do that. I mean, we can look at a tarot card and say, I have no idea what that means. Even if it's reflecting something back in the emerging unconscious, we might not be ready to take it. And then that's absolutely fine. But tarot offers us the potential for insight. And so we can take that, and even if we don't immediately recognize it, there's a part of us, I think, that stores it in the preconscious, and then we can access it later. It's just another reference tool that we have to be able to refer inward. And particularly, we can draw on it when we're ready to see what it is that we want to see, or that we're able to see. And so we have this idea of tarot being that magic mirror, and being able to reach in and to see what it is that is ready to see, and then there is that insight. And then I think tarot starts to do something else as well. But this is something I think I'm going to explore a little bit later. I think I've spoken enough now. But I think that tarot is not a static tool, but it also is an alchemical tool, in that the very revelation of an aspect of ourselves to ourselves through the cards starts a process of alchemy, where the card quickens something inside us that reaches towards what it is that we see in that mirror, so that there is that point of high energy between us, the conscious us, and then the emerging us from the unconscious, and that force field between the two, where I think, which is ripe for transformation, where I think that transformation takes place. But more of that later. I'm going to release this now and see where it goes. And if you have any questions, email me. You can get hold of me on my site. Please feel free to place comments underneath this video. Let the dialogue begin, even if it's simply a dialogue with a part of yourself that is waiting for you to notice it. Thanks very much, and I'll see you soon.